Hello, everybody. Dr. Rick Wallace dropping in on you. I am excited. I know that we've talked about it. I announced the official release a little over a week ago, but it's in my hands now. Book number 24, Academic Apartheid. This deals with specific academic mechanisms or educational mechanisms within the U.S. public education system that directly, disproportionately impacts African Americans, especially African American African American males. Hello, everybody. Dr. Rick Wallace here dropping in on you. Hope everybody is having an unbelievable day. This particular segment of the Black Voice is brought to you by the 7-day online business launch, which is actually a course and program I created that will allow you to literally create a presence, a money-making, revenue-generating presence online, doing a number of different things, and all of the information you can find, there's a link in there. But this segment is brought to you by the 7-day online business launch, which will probably make a little bit more sense to you after we have this conversation. A couple of days ago, prompted by where I was at the process of finishing book number 25, which will be released at the end of this month, which is Chasing Black Wealth. No, excuse me, getting them confused, but it's the quest for Black wealth, chasing the American dream. It's about the journey we've traveled and how there have been mechanisms to keep pushing this wealth gap wider and wider, and why we have fallen victim to it and been vulnerable to it. And it's so many different things, but it's ultimately at the end, after looking at all of the things that have been put in front of us, all the mistakes we've made, all of the things that were there to trip us up, we talk about how we overcome it. And with it being such a volatile point in time in the economy, I thought it was a great time to sit down and actually talk about some of the things that are going on. Why are we constantly experiencing a broadening of the wealth gap when we're supposed to have access to so many opportunities, when racism is supposed to be a thing of the past, and we, all things considered, have so much in front of us that we can do? And so what I decided to do is that I'm going to do a series of videos to talk about different things that are directly linked to the book, but also linked to what we're experiencing now. And I am going to focus on the things that are probably more prevalent and important as of right now, because we need to be immediately and actively engaged in doing things to hedge ourselves and protect ourselves from any form of economic collapse, whether it is the crash of the stock market or the crash of the US dollar, the currency note. And money and currency are not the same thing. And I'm going to do what I can over the course of these videos. Is definitely outlined in the book, so we understand the importance of knowing the difference between currency and money. One has value and the other only has value in the sense of what backs it. If it only has itself, it really doesn't have value. The value is illusionary. So we're going to talk about that in some of the coming videos. What I want to talk about specifically here, and I talked about the importance of understanding the devaluation of the dollar and why the dollar is devaluing. We talked about the fact that on, I believe, April 15th, 1971, President Richard Nixon completely took the US dollar off the gold standard. Now, there had been a process going on starting in 1913, with the creation of the Federal Reserve and the IRS, again in 1933 by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, that also placed us in a situation where we were being moved away from the gold standard, and the gold standard was now being controlled and held. And that was a confiscation act where Americans were required to turn in their gold. And then eventually we were taken off the gold standard. Gold wasn't returned to those people because they turned them in, and then the banks got credit for them. Whole nother different thing. We'll get about into that and other different things. There are a bunch of rabbit holes. I don't want to really take anybody down rabbit holes right now, but I am working with some very powerful thinkers as far as problem solving, as far as the wealth gap goes, as far as individual wealth building goes. And we are venturing down some pretty wild and deep rabbit holes that would blow the mind of the average citizen. And that's not where I'm trying to take you. I want to take you on a trip that the average person can understand, because the average person is going to have to make decisions in the coming weeks and months that could possibly impact their life and generations to follow. And I want to get you away from some of the illusions that are created through numbers and wordplay that give you some sense or idea of what's really happening. So we see, based on some of the latest numbers, the wealth gap is roughly 160,000 gap, an estimated $177,000 median household wealth for whites versus 17,000 median household wealth for blacks. And depending on who's doing the studies, what numbers are being compiled, it can be worse. Very rarely is it better. And so there are numerous mechanisms that I outline in this book. If you want to pre-order the book, the link is in the description box. I think that it is a very comprehensive and well thought out presentation of where we're at and how we've gotten here, but also how we move forward. Some great minds, I reached into some great minds to pull all of this together. So it's in there. But let's just talk about one specific thing. Again, I'm going to do a series of videos, because if I talked about all of this in one thing, we would be talking for hours. It would be so much information that you would not really get a chance to grasp it all or to retain it all. Our attention spans are only going to get us about 20 minutes deep, 30 minutes deep. And after that, we start to venture off. And that's for people who are really strongly focused. So what I want to do is I want to try to keep this under 20 minutes. Will I do that? Knowing me, probably not, but that's going to be the goal. So we'll probably get the gist of what's going on within the next 12 minutes. And then we'll see where we're at. Here, okay, so let's start with this. There has been an ongoing process from the Black codes, which limited what type of jobs blacks could work on. It limited the ownership of property, which is extremely important in wealth building. Redlining, which again limited the ability to own property and homes. Again, a very strong and powerful foundation for wealth building. It's one of the ways that the wealthy pass down their wealth through property estates. Well, that's that part. And we are constantly being fed this idea of, a few years ago it was 1.3. I think they have it now, $1.4 trillion in black spending power. And what they keep throwing it out there is that blacks, based on this 1.4 trillion dollar buying power, would be the ninth most wealthiest country in the world. And I think that it's extremely misleading if we don't understand how this buying power is truly presented. The idea of the average person when they hear 1.3 trillion is that there's 1.3 trillion dollars flowing freely through African American hands, through which we can easily redirect that and invest it in the things that matter to us, like holistically educating our children, creating systems that serve the needs of our, as far as healthcare within the Black community, to create Black-owned businesses where we sustain and maintain the power of ownership and control, which creates autonomy. And so the idea is that, in essence, there's 1.3 trillion to 1.4 trillion that Blacks are simply blowing every year. Now, the truth of the matter is that 1.4 trillion dollars in spending power, very little of that is actually cash. Very little of that is actually asset liquidation or asset mobility or asset translated in other ways or moved. It is predominantly debt. In other words, the largest part of that 1.4 trillions are Blacks spending more than they earn and buying things with credit and on credit. And so that's the accumulation of debt constantly at close to, let's say, a trillion plus. Not the entire 1.4, but a lot of it. Let's say a trillion plus is debt accumulated constantly and is not being paid off at the rate in which it's accumulated, which means that it that thus accumulates. So then what do we have? We have a practice that, in the basic understanding of economics and wealth building, is diametrically opposed and non-conducive to us achieving the goals that we say we want to achieve. We want to achieve financial independence. We want to achieve financial freedom. We want to achieve financial fluidity and be able to be autonomous. Well, here's the problem. When you are spending that much money and it's not money you have, and you're not investing it in things that accumulate or appreciate in value. So in essence, we are taking debt. We are taking on debt annually to invest in things that appreciate in value. So we're taking something of more value to buy something that ultimately will have less value in some instances the moment you buy it. The moment you drive off the lot with a new car, it has depreciated in value by somewhere between 5 and 15%. Before you ever even get home, it's not worth what you spent on it. So then you've invested in something that has depreciated in value and will continue to depreciate in value, and you will never, unless you get to the point where you pay it off, and you're talking about years, get to where it's actually equal what is paid into it, but it will never be an appreciating asset, so it can never grow in value, and it will continue to appreciate no matter what happens. You may get it to where you've actually paid enough on it to where you've broken even, but it will never appreciate. So you invested something of one value into something that will never ever be that value again. So you literally took something and traded it for something less. That's not smart. The number one enemy of wealth building is debt. When you hear the term someone's net worth, this is what it actually means. Someone's net worth is all of their assets, not just their cash or liquid assets. Liquid assets are those things that can be easily exchanged for services, goods, or other things. It's something that can in some way be spent. So you're talking about highly fluid stocks that you can trade and sell, other forms of currency, digital currency, and currency will be considered liquid and highly fluid assets. Anyone who understands money would have a very low accumulation of liquid assets, because that's a highly volatile place. The more liquid an asset, the easier it is to lose, spend, or be manipulated out of. So you want harder assets like property, like gold, like silver, like things that will actually appreciate in value. And so you have to have an understanding of the market. You have to have an understanding of that. But the bottom line is this: the way you determine this net worth that everybody loves to talk about is the totality of a person's assets. That means everything they own that's of value, from homes, cars that they pay for or have equity in, and stocks, property, real estate, whatever. That's your assets. You total that up in value. Then you take your debt. Your debt is subtracted from your assets. And so now you have your net worth. So when we talk about median wealth and we're talking about measuring debt against assets. So what do we have? It's not that every household only has $17,000 in the Black community. What does it mean is that after you subtract all that debt, that's what's left. And so now, again, that's median. But again, what we have to understand is if I'm trying to build wealth, then the first thing that I must tackle and manage is debt. Therefore, if I can't come up with if it's an essential, you have to have it. But you should be able to generate revenue and control revenue at a rate that anything that is essential can be purchased outside of maybe a home, can be purchased cash. If it can't be purchased cash, then it is no longer an essential. Now, when we move into non-essentials, how creative can I get in doing something? I tell you what, I'll give you a prime example of economic or financial creativity in a sense of feeding a fetish or a desire to have something that you don't absolutely have. Back not that long ago, those of you who have known me for a long time know me, but not that long ago, 20 years ago, not that long ago, say 15 years ago, I had a major fetish with cars. Cars and clothes was my thing. And obviously I had a nice house, but cars and clothes was my thing. But I had this unbelievable way of thinking. If I'm going to spend money on it, then I need to have a way of generating money in a way that it pays for itself. So what did I do? I opened up a luxury car leasing business. Now I get to drive whatever I want to, and people pay for it. That's creativity. And creativity can show up in a number of different ways. Obviously, I grew, some things happened and things changed. And now I drive something that I believe is nice, but I'm going to drive it till the wheels fall off. The changing cars every time you turn around thing, I outgrew it. It just wasn't something I wanted to do, and I didn't want to be in that business any longer. Some other things happened, but that's the creativity. It's always something. I'm always looking for ways to make sure the things that I'm doing aren't eating away at what I'm trying to build for my family, for my progeny, for my offspring down the line. And the one way I protect a great deal of what I do is I don't build it liquid. Why? Because it's always something to buy. It's always something to spend. It's always something to go on. And I set it up. Here's another way that you build net worth in your businesses. That's why I am teaching my clients how to start businesses that they can start with little startup. In some instances, no startup, and actually promote and scale out as they build the company, meaning that they can go into profitability almost immediately. And here's the thing, that one of the basic principles of company evaluation, now obviously the bigger and more elaborate a company comes, the more different variables have to be considered when you do an evaluation on the company. But on a basic level, small businesses especially, you're talking about a valuation basically being 5 to 6 times whatever the company earns annually. So if you earn $200,000, $300,000 a year, you ultimately have $1 million valuation on your company's worth $1 million. Now, obviously, there have to be some elements and components in place for that to be viable, because it's only viable if you can actually sell it. So, but you also, I tell people all the time, when you start a business, there has to always be an exit strategy. If you don't have an exit strategy, the company carries no value, because it only thrives with you. It has to be a way that you can move that company, pass it on, or in some way pull the value out if necessary. But that's another way to build your valuation. Your personal assets, a business asset, whatever part of the business you own, that part of the value belongs to you. So you take away whatever debt and expenses it has, and then it has a net value. That net value is a part of your net worth if you own it. So again, that's a way to build value. That's a way to hold value. And that's a beautiful way to move. Here's why. When you start a business, you can determine how you want to move. You can determine how you want to get paid. You want to get paid in dollars. You want to get paid in digital currency. You want to get paid in foreign currency. You can get paid in the strongest currency there is if you know how to negotiate it, and if you're working outside of certain spheres. The thing is, you should be aware of the currency you're working in. What is its strengths? What is its weaknesses? How volatile it is? Why? Because it's extremely important. Because when you transact something and you get paid in that dollar currency, until you are able to put that currency into some other form of an asset, gold, stocks, homes, property, whatever, it's liquid and it's volatile and it's vulnerable to the movement in the market. Well, say for instance, you sell something for $500,000 and you sit that 500,000 in the bank and the dollar crashes. Now the 500,000 is worth zero. You sold something, got something, but lost it because you didn't hedge it or protect it, because you didn't understand, because everybody thinks being rich means having a bunch of money in the bank. No, being rich is being able to produce the things you want and need in order to live the lifestyle you lead. I know people who have never made $100,000 in their life that are wealthy because they knew what to do with their money. They knew how to spend their money. They knew how to manage their lives. And it's nothing that they want to do in the life right now that they can't do because they understood that. One of the stories I tell all the time is about a man named Theodore Johnson. Theodore Johnson, I want to say, came along in the early 1900s, worked for UPS. I think the most he ever made at UPS was $14,000 a year. He happened to know someone who was wealthy and he told him, "Hey, man, I would love to be wealthy like you." And the guy told him what he needed to do. And he said, "You need to take at least 20% of your income and invest it in uh, appreciable assets, assets that are growing in value." And here's the beauty of this thing. He told him, he said, "Man, I only make this amount of money. There's no way I can afford to take 20% of my income and invest it." And the guy said to him, "Because you only makes this amount of money, you can't afford not to." And the analogy that this guy gave to him was, if the US government said that they were going to tax you an additional 20% after you got through whining, complaining, and yelling and screaming, you would pay it and you wouldn't think about it. You need to tax yourself that money and you need to invest it. Theodore, I want to believe, was in his 20s when this first happened. He stayed at UPS his entire life, but he took that 20% every time he got paid and he invested it in the stock market. He invested it in futures. He invested it in things that would appreciate in value. When he retired, he was worth $71 million. There's another guy, a black man, actually. Why I can't think of his name, but he worked his whole life, never made more than $12 an hour. He worked as a parking lot attendant. You may have heard this story, may have seen it, but he worked as a parking lot attendant. But the beautiful thing about it was he worked as a parking lot attendant in the financial district. So the people who were parking their cars in his parking lot were financial advisors. And he would just strike up conversations with them. He would get friendly with them until he got to know him and they knew him. And he would ask them questions and they would give him answers. They would tell him what stocks to invest in. They would talk to him about why. And he just developed the knowledge of it. He started to learn. And when he retired from his $12 an hour job, he was worth well over $1 million and growing. Why? Because it doesn't stop when you retire. That's just some of the things. But the one thing that we have to get out of our minds is this idea that cash on hand is king. Cash on hand can never be king because cash is a representation of something that actually doesn't exist in the US. When we took gold, when we took the US dollar off of the gold standard, we took the value that was backing the dollar. Let me explain to you how currency took place. I did this in the first video, but I'm gonna do it for real briefly here so that you get an understanding. A long time ago, everything that was important and valuable, gold, silver, and everything. That's how you bought stuff. I'm going to send you 30 pounds of gold for this thing, and I'm going to send you a pound of gold for that thing, and I'm going to do. And so everything. What happened is, as people accumulated gold, number one is it became dangerous to keep it in places they couldn't protect it. From what I heard about the story, don't know how true the story is, but it makes the great analogy. That was a locksmith who kept, I mean, not a locksmith, I won't say a blacksmith, but anyway, a person who built safes, more than likely a blacksmith. So this person is building stuff and he's storing it. So they come to him and say, "Hey, look, I tell you what, you can store your gold with me. I'll keep it. I'll charge you a small fee, the beginning of banking. I'll charge you a small fee to keep it. and I'll give you this promissory note saying exactly how much gold you have in here. Well, here's how much gold you have by weight, and you can figure out by weight how much the gold was worth at that time, independent. Right now, it's up there. Anyway, what happens is when you want some gold, you bring it back. I give you how much you need, and you can we'll change the number, we'll sign it. But what people start doing was giving out promissory notes based off of what they had. They would show somebody, this is how much I have over here, and I'll give you this much of it for this. I don't feel like going and exchange it. You go over there, here's my signature. He knows when you get there, you give him this. This is your first check or your first type of currency. So this person goes in and exchanges this promissory note for the actual gold, or has the gold just simply transferred over into their name and gets a promissory note for them. Now, this is starting currency exchange. So currency exchange was always with something of value backing the currency. Well, when you took it off the gold standard, then it became about how can we back it? And a lot of people will tell you that it's a fiat currency. I don't see the US dollar as being a fiat currency. Fiat currency is just that, meaning it's just paper. I see it as something worse. It's a debt-based currency, meaning that the dollar has been able to survive not being underwritten by anything of value because of the debt of US citizens. There are literally countries owning trillions of dollars of US debt. It is what's keeping the dollar afloat. It's what keeps the dollar at a what's known as an international currency. It's an international reserve currency because you can go pretty much anywhere in the world and spend a dollar. It's what everything is measured against, the US dollar. But what we're finding is it's in trouble. Again, it's in trouble. Why? Not just because it's no longer on the dollar. I mean, on the gold standard. It's in trouble because after they took it off the standard, what they started doing was printing more of it to pay for things. They had to pay for the Vietnam War. They had to pay for all different types of programs they were creating. So many different things around that time that they needed to have money for, and they just started printing it. During the Trump administration, this isn't throwing the slugs at any one party because everybody does it, but during the Trump administration, I want to say they printed 100 trillion. Now you're flooding the economy of something that doesn't have value or anything to back it. And anybody knows the more of something you have, the less valuable it becomes. It's scarcity that creates the value. The more dollars in circulation, the less valuable it is. Well, eventually all of this stuff starts tumbling down. So where do you want to create your wealth? You want to create your wealth in hard assets that hold value or appreciate in value, that after the turbulence and the volatility at any given time, because you're going to have crisis in the market, you're going to have crisis in the value of your currency. That's going to happen periodically. It's been kind of crazy the last 15 years, but almost like clockwork up until the crash in 2006, 2007, you would get every 4 or 5 years, you would have a downturn. Take about 12 months to 16 months for it to recover. The one thing that we would learn is the longer it took to recover, the more powerful the recovery. So we never really became frustrated if we understood it, because we know that the longer it takes to recover, the stronger it comes back and the longer it stays. So these are just some of the things that you can learn about the market. But again, what we cannot do is sit up and think that we can go cash heavy and win, or that because they tell us we have 1.4 trillion in spending power, that's actually cash assets, or in any way assets. It's a lot of it accumulated debt. We spend a lot of money that we don't have. That's buying power. Now, who wins with black buying power aren't blacks. It's the people we're spending the money with. Now, if blacks were taking the buying power and investing in businesses, investing in black growth, investing in education, and they were doing it that way, they would. But I can tell you, it's going to be harder to get credit to do that. Why? Because they don't want us empowered. You ever wonder why a 19-year-old can get a $100,000 loan to go to school to get a degree to put on the wall, but can't get a $50,000 business loan to pursue their vision, their dreams, that their gift supports? That's not a win for the other side. So then what do? We have to be smart in how we move. We have to be smart in how we set things up. We have to be smart in understanding things. One of the things that I have consistently said over and over again is that we lose consistently because we simply don't understand how things work. So then we must invest ourselves in understanding how things work. We must invest ourselves in understanding how we're manipulated psychologically, how we're manipulated financially, how we're manipulated academically, why we're where we're at in any given area at any given time. The information is there. I have done the best I could in the books that I've put forth to this point to present that, to give you truths from Born in Captivity to the undoing of the African American mind, to the miseducation of Black youth in America, to academic apartheid, to the invisible father, reversing the curse of a fatherless generation. There are so many different mechanisms and machinations at play. And it takes me back to one of my favorite quotes, which is an African proverb that if there's no enemy on the inside, the enemy on the outside can do us no harm. What does that mean? That means that when we start to fix the cracks, when we start to become focused, when we get out of the mindset that we have to beg them for anything, when we get into the mindset that we must build together, when we start to see each other as allies instead of enemies and competitors, when we start to embrace one another, when we can, as Black men, look at another Black man and see him struggling and not dismiss him, or in some instances even kick him, but reach down and pull him up, when we can see the brotherhood in it, when we as Black men can see the need of our sisters, when Black sisters can stop being so catty with one another, when you can start embracing and loving on one another, encouraging one another, being advisors to one another, being confidants to one another, advising each other how to better structure your lives to get things done, we'll be in a better situation. The same thing with finances. We are not going to wish our way. We're not going to hustle and grind our way. We're going to have to be smart and understand they have a 400-year head start. 246 years of chattel slavery, 12 years of Reconstruction, another 15 to 17 years of Black codes, 70 plus years of Jim Crow segregation. And it really hasn't changed much. They've just changed the names. We still live in a white racial caste system where the system is designed to benefit a specific group while taking advantage and manipulating another group. Everybody else gets in where they fit in. We have to find a way to move around in this system without letting the system control us and succumb to it, but understanding what we can do in it, what we can't do in it, how we need to move. One thing we're going to have to understand is cash is not going to be the way to go in the future. Doesn't mean you don't need it. You need it to move around. That's the way we deal with things. People don't accept anything. You can't walk up and buy something with gold right now. So you're going to have cash. But just having excessive amounts of it put up in the bank is not safe. It's not going to do you good. It's not growing. Put it into something that appreciates, even if it's foreign stocks. Right now, everybody's afraid of the market crash. Here's what I can tell you about the market. If the market crashes, it's coming back. If the market crashes, it's coming back. The dollar crashes, we got a problem. If the dollar crashes, we've got a problem, because imagine, again, if the dollar now is worth 80 cents. So you get say it's worth 80 cents. Okay, so you get $1 million. You really have 800,000 because the dollar's only worth 80 cents. What happens if the dollar drops down to 10 cents? So for the person who had 100,000, now what do you have? 8? Do the math. How many people actually have 100? So you're starting to get how bad this can get. This is one of the reasons you have inflation right now. Yes, in the housing market, some of that inflation, some of that inflated cost is due to a lack of inventory. You have way more people looking for someone to stay than you actually have houses to put them in. So the market price is going up. This is a seller's market. That's part of the problem. The other part of the problem is that the value of the dollar is dropping. So what's happening? The price of material is going up. So it's costing more to build houses. So that's going to automatically be passed on to the consumer. And that's just in that one area. It's happening around. All you got to do is go into the grocery store. If you go into the grocery store and you sit up and you spend $100, I'm shopping for me, so it's $100. I don't get nearly what I used to get when I was shopping for a whole family with the same $100. The price of food is going up because the value of the dollar is going down. That's one of the reasons. And you're going to have to understand that it can get a whole lot worse. And you have to be prepared. Another way, someone else asked what some of the answers. One of the ways that you can do is start to develop relationships. Develop relationships with people who offer things that you know you're going to need. Why? Because you're going to be bartering a lot. Hey, I can come do this for you, or I can give you this, or I can exchange this for that. You need to develop relationships with people who are doing things. Another thing is a good idea is creating a business that can offer services outside the boundaries of the U.S. Technology offers that opportunity. Is a great chance. A lot of my clients do not exist within the U.S. Clients in the U.K., clients in Australia, several countries in Africa, in Central America, Jamaica. So I have clients that are outside the US that will not directly be significantly impacted if something were to go wrong with the dollar, as the people in the US that are going to start going to only what they have to have. And if what I'm offering isn't considered an essential or a necessity, then I'm going to have to really truly deal with that. So in essence, this is a chance to really start to learn and develop. I'm going to give you as much as I can as I'm finishing this book, because I want you to truly see, number one, what's created the wealth gap, but also what's perpetuating it. See, you have the creation of the gap. That was something completely out of our control. The perpetuation of the gap, while there's still foreign or external forces at play, is way more within our control than we realize. And the reason why we don't have control is we are buying into this spending, this 1.4 in spending, black spending power, 1.4 trillion in black spending power. And what we don't realize is that we're actually pumping money into their economy while building debt in ours. Again, the number one enemy of wealth building is debt. Your net worth is your gross worth subtracted with your debt subtracted from it. So if we're building more debt than we are assets, and we don't even understand the difference between liability and assets. Most people are thinking, I'm gonna go out and buy this $400,000 home. I got an asset. No, you have a liability until you start to build equity. And then you can only take the equity and subtract it from the liability to reduce the liability. It doesn't become an asset until you have more equity in it than you have debt in it. And so your home, for the most part, especially in the beginning, unless you put a significant down payment down, is not a lot. It's not an asset. It's a liability until you have more ownership in the home than the bank does. These are things that we have to understand. Most people don't understand it. Well, anyway, I think I brought a man that we're approaching 40 minutes. Hold on, Chocolate is here. Hey, Kim, I didn't see you there. Says it's just frustrating to me that my people are struggling financially when there are so many ways to build generational wealth. Life insurance alone would change. Oh, don't get me started on life insurance. I mean, that acquisition of property, appreciative assets, life insurance, and what most people don't believe it, what most people don't understand. I'm glad that I read that before I got off of here. What most people don't understand is most people see life insurance as a death benefit and miss the wealth building opportunity in it. It's more than a death benefit. It has life. It has so much, and you should get with a person who understands how life insurance works. If you have not taken advantage of that, you're missing out on a wealth building opportunity. We should not be passing on our debt. We should not even be passing on the cost of our burial, but we should also be using our passing on our transition as an opportunity to pass down wealth. And we need to understand that, and we keep missing it because we get consumed in us. What am I doing? What do I have? What can I get? When the truth of the matter is, if you study those who have benefited from generational wealth, if you watch the dynamic of how they move, a person who is a part of a system where generational wealth has been passed down generation after generation, what you're observing is a person living off of what was passed to them. What they're generating is being generated for their progeny, their offspring, that next generation. And that's the way it's built. So I'm going to take what you give me, I'm going to live off of it, but I'm going to increase it. And I'm going to live comfortably off of it. I'm going to enjoy myself. But my responsibility is to ensure that I pass on more to my progeny or offspring than was passed on to me. That's why the gap keeps getting wider. It's just something they understand. Do you realize that while the average Black person, when they buy their first home, is looking for some type of first-time buyer's assistance, some type of down payment assistance, any kind of help they can get to get into their first home, when a large majority of white people get seed money from mom and dad or grandpa and grandma? I'm talking $50,000 and $100,000 for down payments. It's not uncommon. That's the mindset. No, we're starting at zero and we're starting our kids at zero while they are constantly getting advanced and the wealth gap is getting wider. That's on us. We've got to learn how this thing works. You can't keep blaming the system when you keep acquiescing to the system. I believe it was Umar Johnson who said this. It's one of the most simplest statements in the world, but it was extremely profound. He said that white supremacy is absolutely nothing without Black compliance. What happens the moment we stop playing their game? What happens the moments when we stop begging them for what they have and we start building our own? What happens when we stop selling them our genius for pennies on the dollar? Think about all the things that we created that we sold them for pennies on the dollar. They gave us millions for it. They turned it into billions. From BET on, cell phone, the creation of the cell phone, on down the line, just things that we gave them for pennies on the dollar. A lot of the times we were working for them and they were paying us a salary of less than $100,000, and we put our genius on the table and sold it to them for that. They took it and made millions and sometimes billions off of it. And all they did was give us a raise to VP, gave us another $10,000 a year. And we were happy with it because we didn't understand how things work. The thing is, we have a responsibility to know. You can never be strategically prepared if you don't understand what's going on and how people are moving and how things happen and why things happen. People always tell me I spend too much time with my head in books and studying and doing research. It's kept me alive. It allowed me, when I had the worst time of my life, when things went crazy from my business, to recover in a relatively quick period and to be able to create an entirely new brand and to be able to reestablish myself because I simply understood how things work. That is the key to any victory. I was talking to a client this morning, young cat, getting ready to go off to college, and we were just talking. I was going through a rough patch, and so I told him, I said, "You're an athlete, but you won't win on the field because you're more athletic. You're going to win on the field because you're more mentally prepared. Period. Period. Athletic ability gets you so far. Being gifted in skill gets you so far. Being mentally prepared takes you to the next level. And so if we're talking about dealing with finance, then we have to be mentally prepared. We have to understand what happens and how it happens and what's going on. We need to be invested in building. We need to be ready to take opportunities. Playing it safe is not going to get us where we need to be. It won't. We are going to have to take opportunities, which, and again, means taking risks. Anytime that there is something to be had, there's something to be lost. You cannot have something. You can't. The very nature of the idea of being a winner tells me that I have the potential to lose. there's a risk of losing. In order to win, somebody's going to lose. So that means that there's always a chance I'm going to lose something. I have to be prepared for that. I have to be educated and aware of the risk. I need to take calculated risk based off of what I know and understand. I need to hedge my movements. What does that mean? Diversify. Never have everything in one bag. Never give it a go for the home run. Always diversify. Always have your money invested across assets, so that if one asset takes a hard hit, you have other assets that will hedge it and hold it together while you recover in that particular situations. You should not just be in the stock market. You should not just be holding real estate. You should not just be invested in tech. You should have a diversified portfolio of where you're putting your money that appreciates. One last thing, and then I'm done. If you don't have at least 25 to 30% of your discretionary income, and I would argue whether it was discretionary or not, if you don't have at least 20 or 30% of your money invested in something that grows with compound interest, you are dying a slow financial death. You want something that compounds, even though they're taking a hit right now over and over again for year after year after year. The Vanguard S&P 500 produces about 8.2, anywhere from 8.2 to 10% annually compounded. It has created more millionaires than I think in any other one investment. It doesn't do it fast, but does it steady, and it's been riding. I mean, you're going to have dips. I told you, you're going to have ups and downs, but when you average it out, 8.2 to 10 in compounded interest, you can go online right now, go to any compound interest calculator and determine, if I put this amount of money in every month, and it'll tell you how much you're going to have at the end of the year. It'll tell you how much you'll have at 5 years. You can calculate it up to 20, and you'll start to see just how powerful invested in compound interest is. You've got to have these mechanisms and use it. That's why they're winning. They're playing a game that you don't even know about, and they're constantly advancing. And you're thinking this, I'm going to go sit over here and I'm going to do this and I'm going to save my money and I'm going to put it. No. But we've got work to do. Again, if you want to pre-order the book on Black Wealth, that will drop at the end of this month. The link is in the box. Also, my last book, Academic Apartheid, which talks about how they're playing with the minds of our children, how they are targeting our young Black males. Again, that's something that you definitely need to check out. The link to that book is also in there. I'm going to get ready to get out of here. You guys have an unbelievable weekend, and I will check in with you later. Hello, everybody. Dr. Rick Wallace dropping in on you. I am excited. I know that we've talked about it. I announced the official release a little over a week ago, but it's in my hands now. Book number 24, Academic Apartheid. This deals with specific academic mechanisms or educational mechanisms within the U.S. public education system that directly, disproportionately impacts African Americans, especially African American African American males.